Flood. Noun. An overflowing of a large amount of water outside of its normal confines, especially over what is normally dry land. Throughout the history of the United States, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of floods, most of which being very depressing and or very disastrous. Not the types of things I want to make a 10-minute lighthearted video on. But not all floods are the same. Some are more interesting than the others. So naturally, I've put together a video about 3, kinda 5, famous and unique floods throughout U.S. history. I really hope I get extra credit for this. Allow me to set the scene for you. It's New York, 1919. After a recent expansion, the Rockwood Chocolate Factory is continuing to produce mass amounts of chocolate, helping its parent company become the second largest chocolate producer in the United States. Unfortunately, this led to disaster. On the morning of May 12th, a fire started within the factory. Firefighters were quick to respond, dousing the entire building with water and eventually putting out the fire. But that was only the beginning. The combination of hot, boiling chocolate, damage from the fire, and additional water from the fire hoses caused the large chocolate tanks to fail and spill chocolate across the streets of Brooklyn. Hot, soupy, watery chocolate flooded the immediate area. A firefighter was injured. Young, street children were swept up in the ensuing wave. Debris and street waste were collected, and it all led to a small tsunami of brown goo. Now, admittedly, this didn't last long, since chocolate has this unfortunate tendency to harden. But before it could solidify, young, dirty street urchins used their hands to scoop chocolate from the street. As the Brooklyn Daily put it, little fellows fell on their knees before the oncoming flood and dipped it up greedily with their grimy fingers. Eventually, the chocolate was cleaned up, the factory was repaired, and production was restarted. After several decades, the factory was renovated and it is now known as the Chocolate Apartments. Neat. Now, I know what you're thinking. In a video about unique and interesting floods, why are you talking about the Johnstown flood? Now, what makes Johnstown interesting isn't the flood itself, but the fact that it flooded not once, not twice, but 3 times. In late May of 1889, the town of Johnstown, Pennsylvania was experiencing copious amounts of rain. This brought alarm to some individuals who were concerned about a dam called the South Fork Dam failing and flooding Johnstown. I also think it's important to mention that the South Fork Dam had needed urgent repairs for years, but the rich businessmen who owned the lake refused to put up the money to fix it. Anyway, the rain led to flooding, which finally raised enough concern to start fixing the dam. Over the course of the next few days, workers desperately attempted to repair the dam and prevent its failure. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. One of the major misconceptions about Johnstown is that the dam failure caused the flooding. Now, it definitely caused most of the destruction, but the town had already been flooding for hours prior to the dam failing, with some spots reaching as high as 10 feet in water. Anyway, at around 3 p.m. on May 31st, the dam broke and released 3.8 billion gallons of water onto Johnstown. The water led to extensive damage across the town and hundreds of deaths and injuries. But with the American spirit, rather than abandoning Johnstown, the citizens grouped together and with the help of some guy called Dynamite Bill, they cleared the debris and rebuilt the city. This lasted until 1936, when some sporadic fluctuations in the temperature led to mass amounts of mountaintop snow melting. This caused substantial water runoff to fall into Johnstown, flooding the town and once again causing extensive damage. But once again, the people collected together, rebuilt and repaired what they had lost, and it was officially declared that the town from now on was flood-free. At least until around 1977, when 5 other dams broke. Now, the 1977 flood was the hardest to research because it is often overshadowed by the other 2 floods. But from what I could gather, the main cause was that it rained a lot. From what I could find about the dams, some of them were just old and needing repairs, and the rest didn't fail completely. It was just that the water had risen above the dam's limits, leading to a lot of the flooding. As you by now would expect, the water destroyed much of the town, and the people repaired once again. Long story short, I plan to avoid Johnstown, especially considering Hurricane Ida caused some flooding there last year, so it is by no means a solved issue. Okay, it's like 80 degrees outside, and I really didn't want to put the outfit on, so as he mentioned in class, I'm hoping that this will suffice and get me the points I need. If you can't see, here's the piece of cardboard up close, so you know what I'm talking about. Molasses. What even is it? Well, essentially, it's brown, viscous, sticky, liquid sugar. And holy shit, does it smell. But that begs the question, what is it even used for? Alcohol, of course, and since this is the early 20th century, there was a lot of molasses for alcohol. Specifically, a lot of molasses at the Purity Distilling Company stored in a 50-foot high, 90-foot wide tank, aka roughly 2 million gallons. A tank that I should add was very poorly constructed. In fact, it had been leaking molasses for weeks, if not months, prior to the incident. Future Jacob here. It was at this point that my phone overheated and the video shut off, so as much as I would love to have it outside and by the water, since, you know, it's a video about floods, the rest is going to take place in my bedroom. Sorry about that. As a solution to the leakage, the workers painted the tank brown, which is essentially the same type of solution as me using the inspect element to cover up my calc grade. The tank at this point was essentially a ticking time bomb, and unfortunately in January of 1919, the Boston temperature started to rise. And what do rising temperatures lead to? That's right, pressure. The tank turned into a giant metal balloon and expanded well beyond what a normal storage tank should. Rivets holding the tank together started to break under the stress and they shot out like gunfire. Unfortunately, at 12:30 on January 15th, the tank broke. The flood was similar to the chocolate flood in the sense that the liquid was very viscous and slow. However, it was different than the chocolate flood in the sense that the molasses tank was about 5 times the size as the chocolate tank. The wave was 25 feet tall. It moved at speeds up to 35 miles per hour! This was no scenario where street urchins were falling on their knees to celebrate. No, the Boston children were probably sprinting away in fear to escape the ensuing wave. The molasses brought about considerable destruction. It tore buildings off of their foundations, streetcars off of their rails, and it even swept up whole groups of people. The flood caused more than 150 injuries, and unfortunately, it also led to 21 deaths. Molasses residue remained in the streets and sewers of Boston for years after the incident, and there's no doubt that the event impacted the city as a whole, even with its unusual cause. One real quick detail that I thought was interesting, the flood actually led to one of the very first class action lawsuits being filed in the United States. So whenever you see people getting money back from Equifax, or suing Amazon collectively for discrimination, just know that the Boston molasses flood was indirectly the cause. bonus detail, when it was brought to court, the Purity Distilling Company tried to claim that it was anarchists that blew up the tank. Because, you know, if I wanted to bring about anarchy and chaos, I would obviously target a molasses factory. Scratch that. It was technically a distillery, and I guess that makes more sense in the context of the 20th century. Anyway, I think I've wasted your time enough with useless information about random floods, so I'm gonna call it quits here. Thank you for watching.